I found the first note by accident. It fluttered from between the pages of Carolyn's day planner while I was searching for our vacation vouchers. The handwriting wasn't hers, too angular, too forceful, pressing deep into the expensive cream-colored paper. Just 10 words, 11 p.m. Usual place, don't make me wait like last time. My stomach hollowed instantly. 15 years of marriage had taught me to recognize the signs of deception, the unexplained absences, the urgent late-night work emergencies, the password changes on her phone. Over the past 3 months, they had all arrived like unwelcome guests, one after another. I slipped the note into my pocket and returned the planner exactly as I'd found it. In the kitchen, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey neat and watched the sunset paint our suburban home's backyard in soft oranges and reds. Our 14-year-old daughter Emma was at her friend's for a sleepover. The house felt unnaturally quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Carolyn was working late. Again, the 3rd time this week, I didn't call her. Instead, I scrolled through our shared accounts, looking at credit card statements, searching for patterns I might have missed. The charges for Hotel Meridian appeared every Tuesday for the past 2 months, always classified as business meals, always between $150 and $200. Always paid in full the next day. When Carolyn texted that she'd be home by 1030, I responded with casual affection, "Drive safe, love you." Then I called Jack, a college buddy who now worked as a private investigator. "Mike, you sure about this?" Jack's voice was hesitant. 15 years is a long time, maybe there's an explanation. "That's why I'm calling you, I need to know, no confrontation, no drama, just evidence." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, too controlled, too detached. 3 days later, Jack handed me a manila envelope in a coffee shop 20 miles from my neighborhood. His expression was grim. "I'm sorry, man." Inside were photos of Carolyn entering Hotel Meridian with a tall, gray-haired man I recognized as David Harrington, her company's VP of operations. The timestamps showed Tuesday, 8:47 p.m. Another photo showed them leaving separately, her at 1025, him 15 minutes later. I felt strangely calm, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. "Is there more?" Jack nodded. "Phone records, texts, she's been seeing him for about 4 months. From what I can gather, he's married too." That night I contemplated confrontation. I rehearsed the words, practiced the righteous anger that should accompany such betrayal. But something held me back, a strange, cold calculation that surprised even me. Why settle for a messy, emotional confrontation when I could plan something more fitting? The next morning, I kissed Carolyn goodbye as she left for work, smiling as if nothing had changed. When she mentioned another late meeting, I nodded understandingly. "No problem. I'll take Emma to her soccer practice. Don't stress about dinner." The plan formed slowly over the next 2 weeks. I documented everything meticulously: the hotel visits, the calls, the lifestyle creep that always accompanies hidden relationships. I began researching our state's divorce laws, consulting discreetly with a lawyer friend about asset division when infidelity was involved. I created a separate email account and drafted a message to David Harrington's wife, attaching selected photos. My finger hovered over the send button many times, but I never pressed it. Not yet. Timing was everything. I was so caught up in my planning that I almost missed the inconsistencies. The first was simple. If Carolyn was having a straightforward affair, why was she always home by 11 p.m.? Why not overnight conferences or business trips that could provide better cover? The second came from her bank statements. Every Thursday she withdrew $5,000 in cash. Since when did affairs require regular cash payments? On a hunch, I installed a simple tracking app on her phone. Not to monitor her location, Jack was already doing that, but to capture ambient sound when certain keywords were spoken. A questionable ethical choice, perhaps, but morality seemed a luxury I could no longer afford. 3 days later, I hit pay dirt. The app recorded a conversation between Carolyn and David that changed everything. "I can't keep doing this." Carolyn's voice was shaking. "You don't have a choice." David's tone was cold, businesslike. "Unless you want your husband to see those photos, unless you want everyone at the company to know what you did. I've paid you almost $50,000 already. The money was supposed to be for Emma's college fund. Michael will notice eventually." "Not my problem. Another payment, same amount next week. And Carolyn, wear that black dress again. It makes our little hotel meetings more believable." I replayed the recording 4 times, each time feeling the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't an affair. This was blackmail, and somehow I had completely misread the situation. That night I couldn't sleep. Beside me, Carolyn tossed and turned, obviously tormented by her own demons. I studied her in the dim light filtering through our bedroom curtains. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she had lost at least 10 pounds in recent months. How had I not noticed her suffering? How had I been so quick to assume the worst? For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack in my calculated veneer. I still didn't know what she had done, what photos David was holding over her head, but I knew with sudden clarity that I couldn't let this continue. My plan required adjustments, not abandonment. The target had simply changed. The next morning, I called in sick to work and waited until Carolyn and Emma had left. Then I went to our home office and accessed Carolyn's laptop. We knew each other's passwords, or at least we used to. She had changed hers recently, but I had installed a simple keylogger weeks ago, back when I thought I was tracking an affair. Her emails revealed nothing suspicious, but her cloud storage was another matter. In a hidden folder, I found what David had been holding over her: doctored photos of Carolyn, apparently in compromising positions with various executives at her company. They were well-made fakes, but fakes nonetheless. To an untrained eye, however, they would appear damning. Accompanying the photos was a spreadsheet detailing her payments and obligations, a clinical account of blackmail disguised as an affair. My mind raced. Why hadn't she come to me? Why endure this alone? The answer came when I found her personal journal hidden inside an old tax return box in our closet. She hadn't written much, but one entry from 5 months ago stood out. If Michael ever finds out about San Diego, it will destroy him, destroy us. I can't lose him or Emma. I'll find a way to fix this myself. San Diego? I struggled to remember. We had attended a conference there last year, but I had been presenting most of the time. Carolyn had joined me for the trip, turning it into a mini vacation. I searched for other references but found nothing. Whatever happened in San Diego, it was bad enough that Carolyn would rather be blackmailed than have me discover it. That night when Carolyn arrived home late, I watched her more carefully. The way she flinched slightly when her phone buzzed, the forced smile when Emma showed her a school project. The mechanical way she moved through our home like a prisoner granted temporary leave. "Rough day?" I asked, handing her a glass of wine. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Just tired." "Harrington has us preparing for the quarterly review." I noticed her hand trembling slightly as she mentioned his name. "Anything I can help with?" For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a desperate longing, quickly suppressed. "No, but thank you for asking." That night as she slept, I made a decision. Whatever had happened in San Diego, whatever mistake she had made, it couldn't justify what was happening now. I would end this, but not with a confrontation. David Harrington needed to be handled differently. The following Tuesday, I didn't go to work. Instead, I waited in the hotel bar at the Meridian, nursing a club soda, watching the entrance. At 8:30, Carolyn arrived, wearing the black dress as instructed. At 8:45, David entered, looking every bit the successful executive in his tailored suit. I watched them take the elevator together, noting how Carolyn kept her distance, her body language screaming discomfort. Half an hour later, I took the stairs to the 4th floor and stood outside room 412, where Jack had confirmed they always met. Through the door, I could hear David's voice, sharp with annoyance. "The company's facing an external audit. I can't keep hiding these cash deposits. You need to find another way to pay. I've given you everything I can access without Michael noticing." Carolyn sounded exhausted. "Please, you've had your fun. You've taken enough money. Those photos aren't even real." "Doesn't matter if they're real. What matters is whether people will believe they are, and trust me, they will." I had heard enough. I didn't knock. Instead, I used the keycard Jack had arranged for me earlier that day. The door swung open silently. They were seated on opposite sides of the room, not the compromising position I had once imagined finding them in. David was pouring himself a drink from the minibar. Carolyn sat rigid in an armchair, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. David recovered first. "Who the hell are you?" Carolyn's face drained of color. "Michael, I can explain, please." I closed the door behind me. "No need, Carolyn, I think I understand quite well." I turned to David. "Mr. Harrington, I believe you have some photos that don't belong to you." His eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake. Your wife and I are having a private conversation about company matters." "In a hotel room, at night, that's an interesting choice of venue." I stepped further into the room. "I know you're blackmailing my wife, I know about the payments, and I know the photos are fake." David's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "Your wife hasn't told you everything, has she, about San Diego, about what she did?" Carolyn stood up, her voice shaking. "Michael, please go. You don't understand what's happening. I can handle this." "You've been handling it for months," I said gently. Let me take it from here. I turned back to David and held up my phone. Here's what's going to happen. I've been recording this conversation since I walked in. I have copies of the doctored photos you've been using to extort my wife. I have records of all the payments. Tomorrow morning, this all goes to the police, your wife, and your company's board of directors. David's face flushed with anger. You're bluffing. If you had any intention of going public, you would have done it already. I needed evidence of direct blackmail. Now I have it. I stepped closer. Here's the deal. You will delete every copy of those photos. You will return every cent you've taken from my wife, and you will resign from your position effective immediately. He laughed. Or what? Or I destroy you, not just professionally, completely. I held his gaze. I had 2 weeks to prepare for this moment, Mr. Harrington. In that time, I've learned quite a bit about you, your gambling debts, your shell company in the Caymans, the consulting fees you've been charging to corporate accounts. His smile faltered. You're making that up. Am I? Check your personal email right now. Skeptically, he pulled out his phone. I had sent the message right before entering the room, detailed financial records Jack had obtained through methods I didn't ask about. David's hand trembled slightly as he scrolled through the documents. This doesn't prove anything. Then you won't mind if I forward it to the SEC? We stared at each other for a long moment, a silent calculation of risk and determination. Finally, his shoulders slumped. The photos are on my laptop at home. I'll delete them tonight. Not good enough. You'll do it now while I watch. Remote into your computer. Carolyn was watching this exchange with wide eyes, her body still frozen halfway between sitting and standing. After David had deleted the photos, and I had confirmed through screen sharing that no copies remained in his cloud storage, I laid out the rest of my terms. A resignation letter citing personal reasons, complete restitution of Carolyn's money, and a legally binding non-disclosure agreement that would financially ruin him if he ever spoke of this again. You have 24 hours, I said, opening the door to leave. Carolyn, are you coming? The drive home was silent. Carolyn stared out the window, occasionally wiping away tears. I kept my eyes on the road, the adrenaline still coursing through my system. When we pulled into our driveway, I turned off the engine but made no move to exit the car. Whatever happened in San Diego, I said quietly, it can't be worse than what you've been going through these past months. She turned to me, her face a mask of misery and exhaustion. You have no idea. Then tell me. She closed her eyes. I slept with someone at the conference. It was a mistake one night, too much wine, you were busy with your presentations. Her voice broke. I regretted it immediately, it meant nothing. I absorbed this, feeling a strange, hollow sensation where pain should have been. And David found out, she nodded. He was there too, different conference, same hotel. He saw us together in the lobby the next morning. At first, he just made comments, little hints that he knew. Then 3 months ago, he showed me the first doctored photo, said he could make more, make them look real enough, said he would send them to you, to everyone at work. Why didn't you come to me? I asked. We could have faced this together. Her laugh was bitter. And say what? Hey, honey, I betrayed our marriage vows, but now someone's blackmailing me about it. She shook her head. I thought I could handle it, pay him off, make it go away, protect you and Emma from my mistake. We sat in silence for a long moment. I understand if you want a divorce, she finally whispered. I wouldn't blame you. Part of me, the part that had spent weeks planning revenge for an affair, wanted to agree. To walk away with my dignity intact. But looking at her, I saw not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman who had then endured months of torment to protect our family from the consequences of her mistake. I don't know what I want, I admitted, but I do know we can't decide anything tonight. Inside the house, we found Emma asleep on the couch, waiting up despite our texts telling her not to. I carried her to bed while Carolyn checked that the doors were locked. We moved around each other carefully, like strangers sharing temporary accommodations. In our bedroom, Carolyn paused, her hand on the door to our en-suite bathroom. Will you be here when I come out? The question held more meaning than its simple words. I nodded. I'm not going anywhere tonight. Later, lying in bed with inches of careful space between us, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with contradictory emotions. Beside me, Carolyn's breathing eventually deepened into sleep, real sleep, perhaps for the first time in months. I thought about the plans I had made when I believed she was having an affair, the calculated pain I had intended to inflict, the cold satisfaction I had anticipated. How quickly we become strangers to ourselves when betrayal enters the equation. The next morning, I called in sick again. Carolyn did the same. After Emma left for school, we sat at our kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between us. What happens now? Carolyn asked. I considered the question. First, we make sure David follows through on his resignation and the repayment. I paused, then, we decide whether we can rebuild what's been broken. Can we? Her voice was small, uncertain. I don't know, I answered honestly. You broke my trust, Carolyn, not just in San Diego, but by keeping all this from me, by making unilateral decisions about our marriage, our finances, our future. She nodded, accepting the criticism. I was trying to protect you. That's not how marriage works. We're supposed to protect each other. Tears filled her eyes. I know, I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, of Emma finding out. I panicked. I reached across the table and took her hand, the first voluntary touch since I discovered the truth. I understand panic, I understand mistakes. What I need to know is whether this was truly a one-time lapse in judgment or a symptom of something deeper. It was one mistake, she said firmly. The worst I've ever made, but Michael, our marriage, it hasn't been perfect. We've both been so busy, so focused on our careers, on providing for Emma. Sometimes I feel like we're just going through the motions. She wasn't wrong. We had fallen into comfortable patterns, taking each other for granted. The passion, the deep connection that had once defined us had faded into routine domesticity. Then maybe this is our wake-up call, I said slowly. A painful one, but still an opportunity to decide what we really want, whether we're staying together out of love or habit. Over the next several days, we began the difficult process of reconstruction. We confirmed that David had resigned, citing health concerns, and that the money was being returned. We sought out a marriage counselor, someone who could help us navigate the complex emotions of betrayal, forgiveness, and renewal. We also talked for the first time in years, about our dreams, our disappointments, our fears, about what had drawn us together initially and what might keep us together now, about whether love could survive betrayal and trust could be rebuilt. One evening, 2 weeks after the confrontation at the hotel, I found Carolyn sitting in our backyard, watching the sunset, the same view I had contemplated with whiskey and bitter thoughts not so long ago. Emma asked me today why we've both been home so much, she said as I sat beside her. I didn't know what to tell her. What did you say? That we realized we'd been working too hard and needed to reconnect. That sometimes adults get so caught up in their jobs that they forget about what matters. I nodded. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Do you think we'll make it? She asked, her eyes still on the horizon. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I think we owe it to ourselves and to Emma to try. I paused. Not just to go back to how things were, that clearly wasn't working, but to build something better, something more honest. She turned to look at me, her eyes searching mine. I never stopped loving you, Michael. Even that night in San Diego, it wasn't about love, it was about feeling seen, wanted, about escaping the routine we'd fallen into. I know, I said, and I did. The affair, if one night could even be called that, wasn't the root of our problems. It was a symptom of a slow disconnect that had been happening for years. I'm still angry, I admitted. I still have moments where I want to walk away, where the pain feels too heavy to carry. But then I remember. Remember what? She prompted when I fell silent. All the good years, Emma, the life we built, the way you looked at me on our wedding day. I reached for her hand. And most recently, how far you were willing to go to protect our family, misguided as it was. She intertwined her fingers with mine. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right if you'll let me. I didn't make any promises. Recovery would be a long, uncertain road. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. But sitting there, holding hands as the sky turned from orange to deep blue, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again: hope. 2 months later, we were still in counseling, still working through the aftermath. There were good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of doubt. We had agreed to be completely transparent with each other, no more secrets, no more separate accounts, no more password-protected phones. David Harrington had moved across the country, his reputation somehow intact despite his sudden resignation. The money had been returned, the fake photos were destroyed, and the blackmail had ended. But the hardest part wasn't dealing with external threats. It was rebuilding what had been broken between us. I have something for you, Carolyn said one evening, holding out a small gift-wrapped box. Inside was a key. What's this for? I asked. A cabin at Lake Tahoe for this weekend, just us. She looked nervous. It's not to pressure you into anything, it's just a chance to be somewhere new, somewhere without all these reminders. I turned the key over in my hand, considering. We hadn't been intimate since before the discovery, another casualty of broken trust. The idea of a weekend away, just the two of us, was both appealing and intimidating. Emma, I asked, can stay with my sister. She's already excited about it. I nodded slowly. Okay, let's try this. The cabin was small but beautiful, nestled among pine trees with a view of the lake. We arrived Friday evening, the tension between us almost tangible as we unpacked and settled in. That night we sat on the deck, bundled against the mountain chill, looking at stars we could never see through the city's light pollution. "I used to think I knew everything about you," I said quietly. "Now I wonder if I ever really did." Carolyn turned to me, her face half in shadow. "You know the important parts, the real parts. One mistake doesn't erase 15 years, Michael." I really looked at her, and saw the woman I had fallen in love with. Older now, marked by life's complexities, but still essentially herself. Still brave, still compassionate, still capable of both terrible mistakes and extraordinary loyalty. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." Later, when we went to bed separate sides, careful boundaries, I found myself reaching across the divide. Her hand met mine halfway. "I'm not ready to forgive completely," I whispered into the darkness, "but I'm ready to start moving forward." She squeezed my hand. "That's all I'm asking for, a chance." By Sunday evening, something had shifted between us. Not a magical repair of all that had been broken, but the beginning of something new. A relationship built on painful honesty rather than comfortable assumptions, on deliberate choice rather than passive habit. As we drove home, Carolyn asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found out? If I had just kept paying him until he got tired of it?" I considered this. "He wouldn't have gotten tired of it. Men like that don't stop until they're forced to." I glanced at her. "And you would have broken eventually. The weight of it was already crushing you." She nodded, acknowledging the truth. "I'm glad you found out. Not about San Diego, I'd give anything to undo that night, but about the blackmail, about what was happening." Me too. And I was, despite everything. Because the alternative, continuing in blissful ignorance while my wife suffered alone, was somehow worse than facing the painful truth together. When we picked up Emma from my sister-in-law's house, she studied us with the perceptive gaze of a teenager, clearly sensing that something fundamental had changed. "You guys look different," she said as we drove home. "Good different, I think." Carolyn and I exchanged glances. "We're working on some things," I told her. "Adult stuff." Emma rolled her eyes. "Obviously, but you're okay, right? We're okay." I thought about the question, about all the layers within it that Emma couldn't possibly understand yet, about the fragility of trust and the difficulty of forgiveness. About how quickly the life you thought you had can transform into something unrecognizable. But I also thought about choice. About commitment that goes beyond romantic ideals or perfect circumstances. About the decision made daily to build something worthwhile with another flawed human being. "Yes," I said, reaching for Carolyn's hand. "We're okay." And for the first time in months, I believed it might actually be true.